I'll be presenting today on data integrity assurance in the interest of having you examine your controls to ensure that you have sustainable practices implemented to ensure data integrity. This presentation reflects my views and should not be construed to represent the FDA's views or policies. I'll cover Alcoa requirements and talk a bit about data governance, then get into the main topic, risk assessment for data criticality and gap analysis in order to identify any data integrity vulnerabilities in your system so that you can implement corrective measures. I'll go into a couple of case studies from recent warning letters. Uh, in the attempt to use these as learning opportunities for improving your pharmaceutical quality systems rather than identifying the source of those warning letters. Now, everyone deserves confidence in their next dose of medicine, and pharmaceutical quality assures the availability, safety, and efficacy of every dose. Our patients deserve nothing less. When data integrity violations are discovered at the firm, there can be significant regulatory impact on both marketed products as well as on pending applications for drugs, which could in fact impact drug shortage situations. Data integrity applies to all application-related activities, starting from development activities through manufacturing of exhibit batches for the submissions, through commercial manufacture of drug substance, drug product, packaging, etc. So note that if a firm is in OAI status, as we say, official action indicated for data integrity breaches, this will lead to a withholding of the applications that are pending, typically. A bit about data integrity principles, the definition, as we all know, the degree to which data are complete, consistent, accurate, trustworthy, reliable, and that these characteristics of the data are maintained throughout the GMP life cycle. This is as defined in MHRA, but it's aligned with the FDA and EMA text also. Our core principles pertain to the data being maintained in a secure manner and collected such that they are attributable, legible, contemporaneously recorded, retained as an original or true copy, accurate, and in addition, for the plus, complete, consistent, enduring, and available. Now, data governance definition per PICS is the sum total of arrangements which provide assurance of data integrity irrespective of the format in which that data is generated, recorded, retained, and used, thus ensuring a complete, consistent, and accurate record throughout the data life cycle. Note that there is no legislative requirement to implement what is called a data governance system, but this principle applies and this is expected by all regulatory agencies. The FDA, GMP regulations and guidances allow for flexible and risk-based strategies to prevent and detect data integrity issues. So regardless of the terminology you use for data governance, be prepared during inspections to show that effective risk-based controls have been implemented to safeguard data integrity. It is also important, even as you devise your data governance systems, it is critical that firms create and maintain an organizational culture and working environment that supports data integrity as a core value. Now, this is emphasized in the right environment section in MHRA, PICS quality culture, FDA, role of management with executive responsibility in creating the appropriate culture for ensuring data integrity. We have several guidances for data integrity compliance. I'll mention here about three here. In most warning letters, you are referred to the data integrity and compliance with drug GMP guidance. And note that although that guidance cites 21 CFR Part 11, Part 211 and Part 212, it specifically states that these requirements are consistent with the agency guidance on GMPs for active pharmaceutical ingredients with respect to data integrity. In fact, data governance requirements that incorporate risk-based controls, these are explicitly described throughout Q7 good manufacturing practice guidance for active pharmaceutical ingredients. And note that several other guidances include MHRA guidance for that I mentioned here, data integrity guidance and definitions, as well as the EMA and WHO. They offer practical guidance for implementing your data governance system, as well as other publications which are available. The 2018 guidance by the FDA emphasizes the critical role of management. For example, in this statement, it emphasizes it is the role of management with executive responsibility to create a quality culture where employees understand that data integrity is an organizational core value, and employees are encouraged to identify and promptly report data integrity issues. So they should not be pressured by fear of losing their job if they, hold up release due to having OS investigations. In fact, they should be supported and encouraged to escalate such issues. The Q7 guidance under the quality system, section 2, these requirements apply also to systems for ensuring data integrity. And in fact, the link between data integrity failures and quality system effectiveness is exemplified in this warning letter language. Your inability to detect and prevent poor data integrity practices raises serious concerns about the lack of quality system effectiveness. It is imperative that your data generated and used to make manufacturing and quality decisions at your firm is trustworthy and reliable. So management's responsibility is made clear in these guidances. Management is ultimately accountable for ensuring data integrity. This is emphasized in this text from a warning letter. Your senior management at the local and corporate level is responsible for assuring that strict corporate standards, resources, procedures, communication, etc., are in place to detect and prevent breaches in data integrity, and that such significant issues are identified, escalated, and addressed in a timely manner. I mentioned that the guidances Q7 as well as the FDA data integrity guidance have a lot of information related to data governance and guidance for preparation, review, approval, distribution of documents related to manufacture, and including completeness of production and control records and their retention for the defined data lifecycle. Note that although it points to the documents that we would normally think of to be retained in an established procedure, such as the records for routine manufacture, the master batch records, the production records, the control records, the sampling plans, specifications, instructions, etc. It also points out that you should include development history reports, scale-up reports, technical transfer reports, process validation reports, and training records, since these are the documents with the information and data that demonstrate how your uh, product was designed. You incorporated quality into to the design throughout the product development life cycle. And this is important for the next lecture coming up to demonstrate your full understanding of the process. And that lecture will be on established conditions. The guidances emphasize the risk-based approach to data governance strategies for ensuring data integrity. This is evident by the emphasis on controls over critical steps and including verification of data at the time of performance and its review and approval by the quality unit for such critical steps. One of the things that is emphasized that each significant step in the batch production record should include actual results recorded for critical process parameters and signatures of persons performing or supervising or checking each critical step in the operation. These batch records and control records for critical process steps should be reviewed and approved by the quality unit before a batch is released or distributed. That responsibility should not be delegated. And all deviations must be noted, that is recorded, documented, and these critical deviations should be investigated, including implications for other batches that might be impacted. There is also guidance related to computerized systems and the control of electronic data. I have only pulled out a few points here related to some of the deficiencies that we tend to see cited very often in warning letters or 483s. So computerized systems should have sufficient controls to prevent unauthorized access or changes to data, controls to prevent omissions in data. For example, there should be controls to ensure audit trails are not turned off. It should be very transparent if, for example, the system was turned off during data acquisition so that data is not captured. There should be a record of any changes made, the previous entry, who made the changes, when and why. And when critical data is being entered manually, there should be an additional check on the accuracy of those entries. Note that methods should be validated in accordance to their use. The suitability of testing methods should be verified on the actual conditions of use, and this you should pay attention to this, especially for the use of USP methods. This is a citation from a warning letter. Unvalidated methods create a lack of assurance of validity of reported testing data, which could result in non-conforming product being released to the market. So now I want to get into an example of the practical approach for DI risk assessment and control. And I've laid it out here with the objective of design and implement a documented risk-driven data governance strategy for all operations associated with GMP and GDP to demonstrate an appropriate state of control exists for data integrity. So, you know your business processes, you know your unit operations that are involved in your production. So the first step recommended is to map end to end each process where data is obtained or produced. Map also the sub-processes and identify the associated systems, the data flows, including any transfers of data across systems, and also document the format of the data associated with those flows and systems, whether it's manual, electronic, or a combination of the two hybrid data. You should then assess the DI risk considering the system complexity, the data criticality at each step, and taking into consideration the technical and human factors, for example, the extent to which there is manual input of data by operators. We encourage, as you think about your remediation or implementing mitigating controls, that you move towards digitization as much as possible and automation of your systems, since that would allow you to use validation for purpose as one of the methods in which you can protect your data integrity. So then you would identify and document the current controls in place for protecting data integrity. From that assessment, and by the way, in doing your assessment of data vulnerabilities, you might want to uh, use tools appropriate to the criticality of the data, and there is guidance for that in Q7, which includes a number of tools, such as the more complex tools familiar. Uh, but if, for example, you have a system which is pretty simple and just a statement of the risk based on prior knowledge will suffice, you don't necessarily have to at those steps use these complex tools. So this is noted: formality of risk assessment should be commensurate with the complexity of the system, data criticality, and the risk of data breaches occurring. Now, your data governance program, once established, and I just have this laid out in some simple points here, but you would do this under a protocol. There would be, you would identify all of your systems, your processes, etc. So the actual steps would be a much longer list than I have here, but this is to give an example of the approach using critical thinking and also the mapping process and risk assessment tools. Now you would, once you have identified the residual risks in your various systems, you would prioritize those risks, document a risk mitigation plan that includes timelines for actions that cannot be immediately implemented. So do implement risks, which implement controls for risks that you can do immediately, but make sure you document with a timeline what are the intermediate controls that you would put in place and how you would monitor their effectiveness. And by that, I meant interim controls that you would put in place. Your data governance program should not just be done and be treated as a static document. What you want to use this as a tool for continuous improvement and to further mitigate your data integrity risk as new knowledge is gained, as you get better understanding of your systems and processes, as new technology becomes available. So you would want to be doing risk review at appropriate intervals in order that you can continuously improve the controls to further decrease data integrity risk. You should document your data governance program in your pharmaceutical quality system. Here I have laid out what may be the output from your exercise in implementing your data governance program through a risk-based strategy. You may identify managerial controls or behavior controls which speak to quality culture, the, the ethics and data ownership, procedural controls through SOPs, technical controls may be implemented, and you should document the residual risk and what level of risk you will accept in your data governance as you go through the data integrity assessment for your data governance program. And of course, training of your staff is very important in an effective data governance program. Here on this side, I've emphasized the need for continuous improvement through knowledge management, risk review, and enhancing, implementing enhanced risk controls. Challenge your uh, systems and your controls by asking questions such as outlined here in the guidance for data integrity compliance. I will not read through these, but these are general questions you can ask about, whether you have controls in place to ensure data is complete, documented contemporaneously, etc., and they are complete and they comply with the established standards. Make sure that your data is maintained securely throughout the data retention period. Now, as far as your computerized systems, control of electronic systems, you want to ensure instruments are qualified, software is validated for purpose, written procedures are established to mitigate data integrity risk, and demonstrate 21 CFR Part 11 compliance. You want to ask, does the software permanently save data in real time in records which would show to whom is the data attributable? That is, who did the work, when, why, and it should not allow data modification or deletion without making a permanent record of such activities. The systems should have computer-generated time-stamped audit trails enabled in order to track changes and deletions of critical data. Make sure users have passwords that are unique and that the access levels are restricted to that required to do their jobs. Audit trails should be reviewed before batch release and periodically monitored by management to ensure electronic records are not deleted or altered. And all of this should be documented in your SOPs. So let's, at this point, look at some of the case studies I've included here. I'll not go through all. We look at them to see what we can learn from them in order to better in order to improve our quality systems with regard to data integrity measures. The first one, the way I have organized these, the citations and summary, I will discuss that very briefly and spend a little bit more time on the opportunity for learning. So in this case, the deficiency was failure to prepare and use production and control records for each intermediate and API batch. This was a case where batches of an intermediate were being prepared for use in further processing to the final API, but there was an absence of the related batch records. They could not be produced upon request by the inspector. There was inadequacy, therefore, in the control of critical documentation related to the traceability of these batches. So what can we learn from this? Traceability of manufactured batches is a critical part of managing quality, and each firm should ensure that a complete contemporaneous record of each batch of drug manufactured is retained for GMP purpose. So this situation here called into question the adequacy of the quality management system as it pertains to documentation and traceability for all drugs at the firm. So therefore, what you should do in response to this is prioritize the deficiency noted in the quality system for immediate remedial action. So that is beef up your quality unit oversight of GMP activities, but make sure that you expand your risk assessment to other areas of potential data integrity failures. The second warning letter, failure to document known deviations and out-of-spec results and conduct thorough investigations. This is very common in 483s. In this case, there was an undocumented manufacturing deviation whereby the investigator found a note in the batch record stating a deviation from the process occurred, but there was no formal deviation report documented. The effects of the deviation on product quality and the criticality of the process parameter was not evaluated. Similarly, out-of-spec investigations were not documented. They found two sets of testing records for a number of batches of product. One set of records included OS results, while a second set included passing results. So in this case, failure to record activities at the time that they were performed is related to a situation where blank batch records were that were pre-signed by an operator were found. Also found with partially completed batch records. Two process batch records for the same operation were found. One record was partially filled out and the other was completed by a second operator. So a number of things are going on in this case study, but we needed to improve the investigation procedures. All deviations must be documented and explained. Critical documented deviations must be investigated, resolved, and the conclusions recorded, including all other batches that might be impacted. And in the case of the OS, in the absence of a documented OS investigation, there is no evidence to support the passing results. So you know that we have our guidance for OS investigations, and you should have a very detailed SOP for how to conduct these OS investigations, including the steps that would lead to retesting, resampling, etc. I will do one more case study and know that you have a couple more that you can go through, and that will be in the slides. So in this case, failure to exercise sufficient controls over computerized systems to prevent unauthorized changes, and failure to have adequate controls to prevent omission of data. This concerned manufacturing batch records held in electronic form on shared drives without restrictions or on user access. Users could access both new and obsolete batch records, and in one case, multiple versions of batch records were found utilized for API lot production. There were instances of analysts having access to admin role, which allowed them to delete and override data in laboratory systems, and a lot of files were found in folders and were not included for batch review. So what do we learn from this and what was stated by Office of Compliance? To ensure data integrity, actions performed must be attributable to specific individuals in your computer systems. The equipment should be appropriately controlled to prevent deletion and or changes except by authorized personnel. You should implement a system of tiered user access to ensure that each operator or analyst has the access appropriate to their role and control closely the administrative role. Ensure each user has a unique password and do document this as your system for assigning these levels of authorities in an SOP. So as I said, there are a couple more case studies here. On the slide, I've pulled together all of the citations and the warning, from the warning letters, more or less to show that data governance that addresses all these observed DI breaches is in fact clear in the guidances that I discussed. Our previous speaker spoke spoke to a large extent on expectations for remediation of both 483 deficiencies and warning letters. So I will only go to a basic summary of what is expected uh, in this slide. FBA expects a systematic approach to data integrity remediation that usually consists of 3 steps. In step 1, we expect a comprehensive evaluation of the DI breaches to establish the root cause and the scope, so the extent to which it extends over your operations. Next, in step 2, you should do a risk assessment to assess the impact of the risk to patients due to the impact of the data integrity lapses on quality. Excuse me. In step 3, based on quality risk management principles and understanding of your system and processes, you should develop effective CAPAs. Make sure that those are global CAPAs. So you should implement a global CAPA plan. All of this should be documented in a protocol. And often we would suggest that you employ a third-party auditor in order to help you with this process. So I want to just echo some final thoughts. It is really advisable that you take a proactive approach to assessment and implementing controls for your data integrity risks rather than having to remediate inspection findings in a warning letter. In the long run, it is much more cost effective to set up your data governance systems in your pharmaceutical quality system, as I say here. Implement a pharmaceutical quality system with effective data governance strategies and foster a quality culture and mindset that assures data quality and integrity are core organizational values. Here are the references that I alluded to in my presentation. I also want to acknowledge the management of OPMA and several of my colleagues in the Office of Compliance, as well as supervisors and colleagues who assisted in reviewing my presentation. With that, I thank you for your attention, and I will be available for questions on the panel.